typical trial, you might give 100 people a drug to show that it works. So you've also got to give 100 people a placebo for comparison purposes. And you might get, say, 75 people improving on a drug. But it's not uncommon to get 40, 50, 60, 70, 74, 75, sometimes even also improving on the placebo because they think they're getting a drug. And I thought, whoa, it's amazing. What we see here is belief itself shifts biology. And I don't think that's taught enough in medical schools.
So how is it that you can give someone a sugar pill, a saline injection, or perform some false surgery or treatment, and a certain percentage of those people will accept, believe, and surrender to the thought that they're getting the actual substance or treatment, and they begin to program their autonomic nervous system to make their own pharmacy of chemicals that matches the exact same chemical they think they're taking. So the question is it the inert substance that's doing the healing, or is it the body's innate capacity to heal?
Well, everyone seems to be aware of the placebo effect, the result of positive thinking. The important question is this: what is the consequence of negative thinking? Guess what? It's equally powerful in influencing your life, but it works in the opposite direction. While a placebo, positive thinking, can cure you of anything, a nocebo, negative belief, can actually cause any illness and can cause death just because you believe that.
Should we give too much authority to someone in a white coat? You know, I remember one time someone came in and they were really crying because they had received a tremendous diagnosis and prognosis, and the doctor said, the doctor said, the doctor said. So I said, I'll be right back. And I went out and I got a white coat and put it on. I put my name tag on it. It said Dr. Michael Beckwith. And I came in, I said, I'm Dr. Michael Beckwith. And I want you to know that your life is about to get better and better and better. You've had a tremendous wake-up call about tremendous habits that you have had for many, many years. You're about to break that cycle of those bad habits, and you're gonna watch your body change. You're gonna watch yourself come into a greater sense of fulfillment. And then I got a prescription tablet, and I said, every day, this is what I want you to say to yourself. This is what I want you to read. This is what I want you to not eat. This is what I want you to eat. Come see me in 30 days and tell me how you feel, you know? And she went from crying to just laughing because she realized that she had given her power away. It doesn't mean you don't go to a doctor. It doesn't mean you don't follow good medical advice. But if you just give yourself over to an external authority figure, you basically become a victim twice. A victim to the condition and the diagnosis, and now you become a victim to an authority figure telling you about what's going to happen in your life.
Okay, so believe the diagnosis. Now you can do something about it. But don't believe the prognosis. Prognosis is when somebody says you have 3 months to live, or 60% of people die in 6 months. It's like telling what the temperature is now, knowing the average temperature for the year. If you're from New York City and the average temperature is 75 degrees, it doesn't tell me what the temperature is right now.
You know, statistics are impersonal. And you are a person, and no one knows what you're capable of or where you're going to go. You know, if someone says, well, there's a less than 1% chance of recovering from the kind of cancer you have, well, someone's got to be that 1%. And why couldn't it be you?
It's important for people to understand when they're given a diagnosis that if they fall prey to the prognosis without actually considering that there's other options, without actually realizing that they may have to do something differently, that they may have to make new choices, that they are going to have to get beyond certain emotions and overcome their limited thinking. If they can understand that if they're able to do that, more possibilities open up as a result of their own personal changes, that's when you start to see all kinds of magical things start to appear in the person's life.
When the doctors gave you the diagnosis and the prognosis, were they trying to rush you into chemo and radiation?
Yes, and I wasn't gonna do it because I always swore with the acupuncture background that I believe in natural medicine and natural healing. So I wasn't going to do it. I was going to go to, any of the places that do the natural healing with the juices and things. But I have a brother that's a rocket scientist, and I value his opinion. And he said, Lizzie, you're not going to make it. You've been juicing all your life, and more juice isn't going to save your life. You've got stage 4. You've got to do something. So, but it still took me another month and a half because I wouldn't do it. I was going to not do the chemo. And so finally, enough people gathered me up and brought me in, so I did it. And then I started doing a lot of spiritual healing. My friends did a fundraiser that went kind of fast and wild because people were like, oh my gosh, if Elizabeth Craig has got cancer, we're all gonna die. So they raised some money for me. So I started doing, going to all the alternative healers I could find because I thought, if nothing else, maybe I can just chronologue the whole thing and share it with people, and then it'll be, people will learn from that. Deanne Portia was one of the people I called, and she's a spiritual psychologist.
Healing, Topanga.
Originally, the primary purpose for calling her was so that I could die not afraid, because I was afraid to die. And they said that that wasn't looking good.
This guy's fear, panic, worry, and anxiety,
But through the process, instead of that happening, I started to feel miracles.
the first session that we had together was actually the day that she got her chest port put in. And I didn't know that she was going to arrive with that. And that was such a tremendous first step that she had to take in her cancer treatment.
They've got me on a cocktail, they call it. I had one mitomycin that was a little bag, and they ran it into the port, and then they attached me to this one.
It's so stressful to think that, you know, someone is invading your body and then having medicine, which we know is very scary. You know, so she had to make friends with that.
And some people get the port in their arm, their upper arm, and other people just kept working with me and saying, this is medicine. It's going to heal you. This is good for you. And I think that made all the difference in the world.
We have to relate to it as something that is targeted medicine. See it as little Pac-Mans or little soldiers that are there just attacking the cancer cells, leaving everything else intact and not being harmed, because the body does want to move into balance.
Let's go.
I started calling him, because he was my little chemo pack, I called him Chemo Sabe.
Chemo Sabe, all right.
Deanne helped me change my attitude that he was medicine and not, you know, poison.
The power of belief is, it's almost everything. It really is. What you are believing and thinking at this moment is telling your immune system to either stop and not work because we've got to run from a stressor, or everything's cool, why don't we relax, and if there's anything that needs to be cleaned up, clean up. That's it. You're either in fight or flight or you're in rest and repair, and it's your beliefs that toggle that switch. So beliefs are everything.
Back in 1968, I was learning how to clone stem cells. And back at that time, just a handful of people in the entire world even knew what a stem cell was. So I was in the right place at the right time to make some interesting discoveries. I put one stem cell in culture by itself. It divides every 10 or 12 hours. At first there's 1, then 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, doubling. So I have 50,000 genetically identical cells. That's not the experiment, this is. I split the cells into 3 different Petri dishes. And what I do is I change the chemical composition of the culture medium. Culture medium is the equivalent of blood. So if I'm growing mouse cells, then what I do is look at mouse blood, see what it's made out of, and then try to make a synthetic version of that called culture medium. So here's the point. Genetically identical cells in 3 dishes, but slightly different environment because of the chemistry. In one dish, the cells form muscle. In a second dish, the cells form bone. And in a third dish, the cells form fat cells. Significance? What controls the fate of the cells? Point? They were all genetically identical. The environment is what was selecting the genetic activity of the cells.
People who have the same DNA, who have the same susceptibility to illness, one can become ill and the other can stay well. One can heal and the other can't, all because they optimize the environmental factors that control gene activity. And that's what the field of epigenetics is all about.
The nature of biology is simple. Biological organisms adapt their biology to fit into an environment. Let's say I'm looking at the activity of my liver cells in the body. And I say, well, my liver cells should be adjusting to what's going on in the environment. And I say, well, how does a liver cell know what's going on in the environment? And the answer is this: the liver cell is not touching the environment. It depends on the nervous system to send information about the environment inside the body so the cells adjust their biology to match what's going on in the world. Well, we only have one problem in that, and that is this: consciousness is an interpretation. So my mind is interpreting the environment. So if I change my perception, my mind, change my belief about life, I change the signals that are going in and adjusting the function of the cell. The point is very, very significant. I, by my ability to change my environment and by my ability to change my perception of the environment, have the ability to control my genetic activity. I'm not a victim of my heredity, I'm a master of my genetic activity. In understanding how we deal with the environment and deal with perception, there's a mind between the environment and my cells. And when I say the mind, everyone thinks of a single entity, the mind. The mind is comprised of two interdependent elements that work together, and that's the conscious mind and the subconscious mind. The conscious mind, the latest evolution of the brain, is the creative mind. When the conscious mind is engaged in thinking, the subconscious is the default program, the autopilot. So my conscious mind can be engaged, but my subconscious mind will carry out whatever chore I'm doing: walking, driving the car, communicating with another person. I don't need my conscious mind for that. I already have programs of how to do all those things. When we look at the world, we're actually operating through the subconscious mind. The programs in the subconscious mind primarily came from downloading other people's behaviors: your mother, your father, your siblings, your community, in the first 7 years of life.
We are essentially an open sponge to the world, absorbing the patterns from all of those people that we are exposed to and surrounded with. So if we have caregivers who are really conscious and have learned to manage their emotions and heal their hurts in a healthy way, that's a really good thing. Very few people I know were blessed enough to come from those families.
Let's say we're growing up in an environment where there's trauma in the household. Alcoholism, family conflict, inflamed relationships. And when we don't have tools to process our emotions in a given moment, that becomes a memory that's not fully formed. We end up seeing ourselves and the world around us as if we're still 4 years of age in an environment of just conflict and trauma and drama. We filter and therefore feel that again and again every time colors, sounds, smells, taste, feelings get triggered. Boom, we react as if that memory were going on for the first time. So you can attempt to outrun the subconscious mind just like you attempt to outrun a shadow. You can't. You got to turn around and face it. You got to see the problem as the portal. And so recognizing that these symptoms and stressors are meaningful and brilliantly intelligent in waking us up.
I was going twice a week to visit Dee, and my brother would drive me up and do the sessions. And the funny thing is every time, well, after the first few, no, actually, I'd say every one of them, I would think, I have no idea what I'm going to say. I don't feel like anything's wrong. I don't know. You know, okay, we'll just talk. And then somehow she would do like an exercise or a thing, and then something would come out, extracted from some place in the past that I never, you know, like talk therapy wouldn't get to this, or your own thinking or whatever. I lovingly forgive and release all of the past. I choose to fill my world with joy. I love and approve of myself. Working with Deanne, we started working on like all those feelings, the grief, the sadness, the fear of the cancer, and then things that were deep down inside that I had no idea were residing, like old stuff that I really didn't even think of.
And why is that you?
She kind of takes what everybody gives her, and she doesn't really ask for much, and she's gonna get better.
Elizabeth identified a time in her life when she felt really pathetic. There was an incident where she, you know, all the kids were supposed to bring something to school, and she brought graham crackers. That's all she had to bring, and they made fun of her. So she just kind of adopted this belief that that was pathetic, how pathetic that was. And she carried that with her for a lot of years. I mean, into adulthood without even understanding or realizing how that pathetic self-image would carry forward in relationships and in adult life. Ask for Spirit's assistance and go for the deepest healing. The healing tools can involve inner child healing work, sacred anger work.
Yeah, I've got it right now. Boy, am I mad right now. I'm mad.
So the sacred anger work, when that comes up and there's anger in a session that's ready to move, we will go out on the back hillside and we throw rocks. And to throw these rocks as hard as I can and move that stuck energy.
I didn't know that I had such a detrimental mindset. I thought that it was a pretty good one. But the cancer personality style, the I don't want to be a burden, it's easier for me to give love than to ask for it. It was really important for me to learn how to ask for help and to connect.
You know, there's this tendency for people to feel like they did something wrong if they got sick. But if we aren't aware that we have limiting and negative subconscious beliefs running our lives, then we can't blame ourselves for getting sick. If we stay in fear and resistance, we not only waste valuable energy that we could use to heal, but we are closed off to information and possibility. If instead we ask ourselves, what is this pain or condition trying to tell me? It creates space so that the answers can come into our awareness.
I've always, even from, when I was young, been fascinated with health and wellness, being the best you can be. It was always part of even going through high school and college. And then I came across Ayurveda probably about 16 to 17 years ago. I was sitting there and I was like, finally, someone knows what the hell they're talking about.
The constitution is Pitta Vata.
I think one of my favorite parts is that we have something called samprapti, which is a Sanskrit name which describes the process of how disease comes into existence. And there's 6 stages. And when I first heard this, it was just so beautiful and so simple. And the first stage is accumulation. You accumulate too much of what we call a dosha. Dosha is the quality of energy. You've got too much fire, you've got too much air, you've got too much earth and water in your system. So let's take fire. If you accumulate too much fire in your system, you may have a symptom of like a sour belch from time to time. No big deal, but that would be a sign of there's too much heat in the system. The next stage is aggravation. Now it becomes aggravating to the system, so that what was a sour belch now becomes a little bit of heartburn.
Don't let the food you eat during the day haunt you at night.
Again, in this day and age, no problem. We got the solution, right? You take Prilosec, Nexium, whatever. You don't actually deal with why do I have the imbalance, because it's considered somewhat normal to have heartburn. The next stage is spread. So now the excess heat that's in the system that hasn't been addressed because that individual is still eating too much spicy food, still drinking alcohol, putting too much heat into the system, spreads. The 4th stage is localization. So now that excess heat that's in the system that started with accumulation now finds a weak spot in the system where we've lost some integrity. Let's say the guy we're talking about was a football player in high school and maybe took one too many blows to the knee and his knee's a little funky. That would be an ideal place for the excess heat to find a home. So now that progresses over time to maybe arthritis. So it becomes manifested as disease, and then the sixth stage it becomes diversified. So now it actually alters the tissue system itself. Maybe it becomes rheumatoid arthritis. So the beauty of that system is if you understand those 6 stages, that if you want to prevent disease, what do you prevent? Excess accumulation. Prevent buildup. Now, to me, where the biggest buildup is right here. And so you see that whole disease process applies to the physiology and the psychology.
We've been emailing back and forward
Yes.
Before our meeting today of things that you want to approach.
Right.
And why do you feel that it's time for you to work on this?
I think it's the physical aspect of it that's forcing me to realize that maybe there's something more to than just being sick physically. You know, past emotions that are maybe affecting me.
Like when we go on a plane, we're frightened.
Right.
Yeah?
Right.
We have a physical response to something that's happening emotionally, which is we have sweaty palms,
Right.
we have heart palpitations. So that's a physical response to something emotional.
Right, yeah.
Now imagine if you were denying something
Right.
daily and it has nowhere to go until it starts to build.
Right.
And it builds and it builds and it builds into, you know, pick your disease.
This idea that emotional blockages can lead to physical blockages. So the idea then is to release them. And you can do that however you want to. Some people, you know, let it go in a Zumba class. Other people went to see a shaman and did soul retrieval. You know, it's across the board. Some people did psychotherapy. Some people, you know, burned all the letters from their ex-husband. So it really is whatever works. Whatever's gonna allow you to let go of that anger, to let go of that resentment or that grief or that trauma, you know, that especially trauma, which can often be locked away inside your brain in the subconscious part.
So we're going to do emotional freedom technique. We spoke about it the other day.
Right.
And it took a little bit to get to the emotions because you're so good at denying them and pretending that
Hiding
everything's
them.
fine. And but we took a lot of notes. And the emotional freedom is being able to go there, being able to go to the thing that we suppress and allow it to come up. I'm frightened of the unknown.
I'm frightened of the unknown.
I'm frightened of what I know.
I'm frightened of what I know.
And what I don't know.
And what I don't know.
I'm frightened of what I know.
I'm frightened of what I know.
And what I don't know.
And what I don't know.
I'm frightened of what I know.
I'm frightened of what I know.
And what I don't know.
And what I don't know.
I'm frightened of what might come up.
I'm frightened of what might come up.
When we have an emotion within our hearts, that emotion sends a signal to our brain, and the quality of that signal determines what the brain does in response to the emotion. So if you can imagine a signal from the heart to the brain that is a very smooth series of waves, nice, even, coherent is the term that's used, waves from the heart to the brain will match that smooth, even, organized chemistry, and it will release the chemistry that supports life into our bodies. This is where our immune systems become really strong, super immune response. On the other hand, the stress chemistry, when we feel those moments of frustration, anger, hate, jealousy, rage, fear, the signal looks different. It looks kind of like a bad day on the stock market. It's a lot of very chaotic, unorganized, jagged waves going from the heart to the brain, and the brain receives those waves and says, oh, I need to match this chemistry. This is stress chemistry.
When we're in a state of stress, our energy field goes into a state of resistance. That's why a polygraph works. You know, we're able to read it. In that energy, our blood is affected. It doesn't flow as effectively. Heats up, cools down. When we're in stress, there's resistance. That affects our pH. And we become more acidic when we're in a state of stress. In a localized or systemic full body acidity, inflammation occurs. And it's just a reactive way of pumping more blood to attempt to help with healing. However, we're starting to go down a slippery slope because that inflammation is a fire. And that fire starts to burn the house down.
So we have things building.
Yeah, maybe.
Things just build and build and build, and then they come out in the skin.
Yeah.
Yeah. Things that you pretend don't bother you.
Right.
What about your mother? You mentioned your mother in the email.
Yeah, I can't even go there.
You can go there. This is the opportunity.
Yeah. Well, we're estranged. We don't speak.
Yeah.
It's been off and on like that for 10 years, maybe more.
Is she ill?
Mentally?
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say so. She's on Valium, you know, she's on a lot of stuff before, and she's weaned down over the years, I think, but it affected her a lot. You know, just, okay, you have to go pay the rent, you have to do this, you know, all of this, like, from a very young age, you know, 3rd, 4th grade. So there's a lot of responsibility very young. You know, I started driving very young, so I could drive her to work and drop her off.
Yeah.
You know, ironing her outfit for work or doing certain things that just
You were
a
the
lot.
mother of the mother.
I think so.
Yeah. Where's your father?
He couldn't deal with her craziness either, so he left when I was maybe 11. And just left and never came back.
And you've never seen him since?
No.
Ready? Take a nice deep breath. Even though it was a lot for me to take on.
It was a lot for me to take on.
But I did it anyway.
I
deeply
deeply
and profoundly
profoundly
send that little girl my love.
send that little girl my love.
Even though it was a lot for me to take on.
It was a lot for me to take on.
But I did it anyway. I deeply and profoundly love and accept that little girl. Even though it was a lot for her to take on. But she did it anyway. I deeply and profoundly send her my love. It was a lot for her to take on. It was a lot for her to take on. It was a lot for her to take on. It was a big burden. It was a big burden. But who else was going to do it? Who else was going to do it? He left. I picked up all the slack. I picked up all the slack. Because I loved her. I loved her. And I wasn't going to abandon her. I wasn't going to abandon her. Take a deep breath. How'd you feel?
Good.
How do you feel about her now?
Every authentic spiritual path has some mention or some teaching around forgiveness. I always say that all forgiveness is self-forgiveness because the resentment I may hold towards another, or the unforgiveness, or the rancor, or the resentment, all of those thoughts are happening within me. Even if someone did me wrong, I still have those thoughts. Those thoughts are affecting me. They're affecting my body temple. They're affecting my blood chemistry. They're affecting everything. So when I begin to forgive the so-called other person, I'm releasing rancor, resentment, animosity. I'm releasing all that unforgiveness so that I'm actually forgiving myself. Now, that doesn't necessarily let the other person off the hook for whatever they did or didn't do or should have done or should not have done. It has nothing to do with them. It has everything to do with me.
Forgiveness, when it comes to emotions, is the greatest access to letting go. the hatred you have of a parent, the judgment you have of a coworker, the wrong-making you have towards your spouse. Like, just let go of that inner judgment, blame, and basically a victim mindset. If you can let go of that and recognize that life is actually working for you, not against you, then again, you're going to generate healing.
So now I have a really good idea how trauma, negative emotions, and subconscious beliefs can lead to disease and might be something we have to look at in order to heal. But what about the kids that come into this world already sick, or children that get sick at a really young age? Surely their condition can't be a result of accumulated stress or unprocessed trauma or disempowering beliefs. Why do they get sick?
So people ask me, what about children? You know, children, young children that come into this world with some condition, how can that be from their subconscious, or is it? And the answer to that is that we simply don't know. I just have to be honest and say that every human that emerges into this world, what has happened before we got here is different for all of us, and we have no way of knowing, and this is where we begin to cross the boundaries of science and spirituality, and the words like karma, or destiny, or fate. We don't know what those are. What I do know, without any shadow of a doubt, is once that beautiful child arrives in this world, their bodies, their cells, their DNA will respond to the environment and the conditions that we give to them. Our job is to learn to optimize those environments and those conditions.
Individuals come into the planet, and many of them come into the planet because they know they're going to go through some stuff, and they're coming to up-level the awareness of the species. So we don't look at it like, well, this person was born with this disease, and that kid was born with that disease, you know, what's wrong? Many of these individuals are coming with very special gifts. On another level, today, a baby that's being born is affected with tremendous, more toxins than ever.
The World Health Organization's classed outdoor air pollution as carcinogenic.
When you look at so many of the cancers, for instance, we absolutely know. This is not some mystery. We know where a lot of these come from. They have to do with chemicals in the food. They have to do with chemicals in the air. They have to do with chemicals in the earth. So did human consciousness create this? Absolutely. But not necessarily the consciousness of the person who contracted the disease. If you are truly treating the earth with reverence, would you allow the level of pollution and contaminants that we allow? If you were really thinking about your children with reverence and holy responsibility to a future generation, would you allow some of the things that we allow? So, if the entire society is allowing economic forces to prevail rather than real humanitarian principles and love of the earth and love of each other and love of our children, then you get what we're getting.
Imagine for a moment popping a pill before bed that costs about $13.50. Now imagine waking up the next morning, find that the price of the exact same pill jumped to $750 overnight. That is just what happened to one drug. Meg Terrell joining us now with that story and the man who's behind that price spike. Meg.
Thank you, Brian. And Martin Scarlett joins us now from the NASDAQ. He's the CEO of Turing Pharmaceuticals. Martin, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Now, you guys have said that the reason you increased this price so much after acquiring the drug was in order to do the research and development to develop a better version of Daraprim. I just got off the phone with an HIV doctor who told me they don't need a better version of this drug.
We have the most money going into healthcare than any country in the world today, and we have some of the worst statistics of healthcare. The problem is this: the pharmaceutical industry is a corporate industry. Corporations. What are corporations? They're systems where people invest money so they can make a profit.
I entered the pharmaceutical industry as a young scientist, and I just wanted to cure cancer. And it turns out that most of my friends and colleagues in the pharmaceutical industry, all the scientists, they also just want to, a lot of them cure cancer. They want to save lives. It's only when you get higher up in the company that the goals begin to change.
Martin, we do appreciate you coming. I got to ask you one more question. In response to all of this attention and doctors and patient groups saying they can't access this drug, are you going to change the price?
No.
So in my examination of
pharmaceutical products in general, I began to notice a pattern. And the pattern is that we are told that there's a problem, and the problem may not actually exist, at least not in the way that we're told that it does. And then we're offered a product based on resolution of the fear inspired by awareness of this problem.
Sleep. Remember when it welcomed you like a friend? Then it became more elusive. But why? When you have insomnia, it may affect the wake neurotransmitters in your brain, disrupting your wake and sleep messages.
And in fact, if you follow and dig into the literature, what you'll find is that the very product that's offered to solve the problem actually creates and perpetuates the problem it purports to resolve.
Hallucinations. The temporary inability to move while falling asleep or waking